Okay, today what we want to go ahead and talk about is the coordinate plane. You should be fairly familiar with the coordinate plane, but what we're really doing right now is we're just going to go back, review our knowledge of the coordinate plane, and make sure that some of the basics are what we remember. So first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and label some parts of this coordinate plane. We'll get to the graphing of the points later on. So first things first is we have right here in the center, we call that the origin. Okay, the origin has coordinate points at 0, 0. And I want you to think of this origin as where you're always going to start. It's where you begin. You're originally going to begin always at 0, 0. Whenever you see a point to graph, I want you to always start at the origin. The next thing we want to talk about is our x-axis, okay? This is our x-axis. It's already labeled x on your paper, but we want to go ahead and label it as our x-axis. Now, one thing I want you to remember is anytime we see a coordinate point, we always go along our x-axis. And look at this x-axis for a second, and look, it's just like a number line like we have in the classroom, where we have our positive values going to the right, and our negative values going to the left. So whenever we see a coordinate point, the first number in a coordinate point is always our x part of the coordinate point. Then we have our y-axis. Okay, and if you look at the y-axis, it's kind of similar to the x-axis, where it has positive values going up, negative values going down, and the 0 in the middle. Okay, that's our origin. We always start at 0, 0. Okay, so we need to think about it in that type of way. Okay, kind of like a number line, positives up, negatives down. Think about like when we're talking about sea level. Okay, at sea level, it's at 0. When you go above sea level, let's consider 0 as our C. And we go above sea level, it's positive. You go below sea level, it's negative. Okay? And our number line for our x-axis, to the right is positive, always. To the left is negative, always. Another thing you need to know about this coordinate plane is it's not the spaces that are numbered. This isn't 1. This isn't 2. Okay, that's not what's being numbered. Okay, what's being numbered is actually the line. This is line 1. This is line 2. This is line 3. So we don't want to think of it kind of like if we're making like a graph. Okay, we want to think of it like if we're making like a bar graph. We want to think of it more as creating points, and that's what we want to do. Okay, real quickly, just to review, we have quadrants. I like to number the quadrants in terms of Roman numerals. So we look at it in terms of a C, and my C, I just go along with my C and call this quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Okay? So that's what our C helps us with. We start here. Now, if you make your C backwards, if you start at the bottom and work your way up to the top, you might have issues with this. But if you make your C and you start at the top and go around, then you'll always be in good shape. Okay, so leave those labels on. I'm going to go ahead and clear it off just so we can go ahead and start graphing some points. I'm going to go ahead and put my labels here though. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Couple things about our quadrants. Quadrant 1, if you look at any point in this quadrant, if I made a point right here, that would be a positive 5 and a positive 2. I would label that point as 5, 5, 2. Okay, that is a positive coordinate point. So some people like to say that this is my positive quadrant. Okay. If I'm looking at quadrant 2, if I made a point here, The way I would label it, I go along my x-axis to -5, and then I go up, and it's +2. So some people like to say that quadrant 2 is our negative positive quadrant, okay? Quadrant 3. I like to say that quadrant 3 is the complete and total opposite of quadrant 1, where if I was to label this point, it would be -5 because I had to go back 5 and then down 2, -2. So that would be my negative quadrant. You see how I'm always going along my x-axis first, and then I'm going along my y-axis, okay? Remember, x comes before y, all right? So it's always x, then y, x, then y, x, then y. And then quadrant 4 is opposite of my quadrant 2. So if I was to make that point, starting at 0, go up to 5, down to 2, that would be 5, -2. All right, see how I'm putting it in parentheses as well. We want to be sure that we do that. And so this is what I would call my positive negative quadrant. Now see how quadrant 2 is negative positive and quadrant 4 is positive negative. See how that's kind of opposite from each other. Okay, so that's the basics of the coordinate plane. Let's go ahead. So here I have coordinate point 5, 6. I go over to 5, and if you need to, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's going to be in quadrant 1. -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's going to be in quadrant 2. And we can label these points 5, 6, -7, 11. Okay, 9, -5. So over to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, down to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And see, it's just a point that I'm making. 9, -5, and that's in quadrant 4. -9, 0. So that first number says I go back 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0 says you don't go up, you don't go down. You stay right at that -9. So I'm going to go ahead and say that point is on the x-axis. All right? So -9, 0 is on the x-axis. 0, 12. That first number 0 says don't go left or right, but go up to 12. That's 0, 12. And that's going to be on the y-axis. So -1, -1. That's going to be 1, -1. That's going to be in quadrant 3. 4, 0. Go over 4, stay at 0. 4, 0. And you should have said x-axis. 8, 17. Over to 8, up to 17. I'm going all the way up to the very top here. 8, 17. And that's still going to be in quadrant 1. -7, -9. What I'd like you to do for these next 4, pause it, go ahead, plot the points, and go ahead and graph the points. I'm sorry, and identify the quadrants, and check your work. Okay? Thank you. -7, -9. That's quadrant 3. Oops. 12, negative 1, over 12, down 1. That's quadrant 4. 0, down to 8. And that's on the y-axis. And negative 3 up to 10. That's a comma in between those, and that's going to be in quadrant 2. At the bottom of this page, if you have any questions whatsoever, go ahead and write them. But what I would also like you to write is explain, how do I graph a point? And if you need an example, go ahead and use, let's say, 5, 9. Or you can say negative 6, negative 2. Or you can say 6, negative 3. Or finally, go ahead and use negative 5, 8. Okay, go ahead and explain, how do I graph these points? Okay, you can plot them up there if you want to, but explain in words, using words, write to explain, how do I graph a point? Thank you.